Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Criterion Concepts Seerah Podcast. Today we begin, inshallah, a series of discussions about selected stories from the Seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions radiyallahu anhum. So before we go into the discussion, can you please address the audience and explain what's unique about the Criterion Concepts curriculum and the approach?
Assalamu alaikum, Sajjad, and to the audience. So we wanted to approach the Seerah from a little unique perspective. We created a curriculum that was designed to teach critical thinking, situational analysis, and triangular thinking, and move away from binaries, yeses and nos. And we wanted to research the Seerah and evaluate the Seerah in a way that we can contextualize and contemporize. Because generally the Seerah is taught, one, through a chronological approach, or two, through an events-based approach, and three, a very sensational approach. And all of those approaches have their benefits. They have served the Ummah and humanity, but we felt that in order for us to contextualize and contemporize the Seerah, for it to operationalize the Seerah, it had to move to a critical thinking, situation analysis, and triangular analysis approach.
Can you talk about what triangular analysis or triangular approach is?
Great. Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to do was, proverbs are important in all societies, okay? And we wanted to also create visual proverbs that would help embed lessons in the mind of the learner. Hence, part of what we're doing here is we use the Umar radiallahu anhu series, we play clips on that series, and we've built lesson plans on the series.
Okay, so that's how your approach is structured around video clips, visual proverbs, as you just said.
And most important visual proverbs we want to emphasize is that think in triangles, just not yeses and nos and halals and harams. Okay. In most cases, there are many times a third option, which is the ethical option, and it's usually the best option, especially given the complexities of the modern world. Because if you see the world in black and white, if you see the world in yeses and nos, it becomes a very difficult world to navigate. Modern society is very complicated, so we wanted to, through the curriculum, also teach triangular thinking. And visually, think of a triangle.
Okay.
And every time you're looking at an event from the Seerah, yes, we understand those figures were great, their achievements are great, according to the historical record they were great, they were empire builders in many ways, etc. But for those lessons to be valuable to us today, it just could not be a sensational approach. It had to move to an analytical approach.
Right. So there's that saying, right? I mean, small minds focus on people, average minds focus on events. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And then great minds discuss ideas. Yeah. So I think there's some inspiration from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, the First Lady of the United States. Small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, great minds discuss ideas. So we wanted to develop a curriculum that focused on the idea. In order to strive, you need to be able to think about the relations between people, between communities, and most importantly, ideas. And there's tremendous amount of information available, but how do you link ideas? We thought you cannot contextualize the Seerah, you cannot contemporize the Seerah if it's strictly an events-based approach. So we created a theme sheet and an analytical framework to look at the Seerah from that perspective. So the way we built it is there are 40 themes under 4 different tracks, under belief, self, family, and society. And we try to say, okay, in this specific lesson, what theme do we see? Do we see discipline, deflating pride? We see negotiations. We see personality clashes. And that can then help the participant extract meaning for themselves.
So it's those themes and those ideas that emerge from the episodes that we focus on throughout the series that then you can contextualize and contemporize. Right, and apply them. So that goes back to what you said earlier. You want to focus here maybe as in comparison to other efforts to teach the Seerah, which are all, as you said, very necessary and good. The idea here is to operationalize, and you can't operationalize until you understand what the idea is, what the drivers are, what the themes are, and then how you try to apply it here.
Exactly. So we have a belief that, that generation was an extraordinary generation, the best generation.
Sure.
But continue to sensation, we should understand their greatness. We are what we are today because of them.
Sure.
right? So we don't want to de-emphasize that, but what we want to say is to operationalize an idea, especially an ancient idea, you have to be able to contextualize and contemporize it. And what's the fundamentals in order to do that? One, you must have a deep understanding of the environment in which that idea emerged, the context.
Right.
And then you have to have a deep understanding of contemporary society.
Sure.
And then you say, okay, that ancient idea, for it to be contemporized, to be useful as a problem-solving tool, as an upliftment tool, as an intellectual enhancement tool, can only happen through an analytical framework. It cannot happen through a sensational framework, we think, and we don't think it can happen through an events-based or chronological framework.
Well, perfect. Let's sort of start on this journey. So for today's discussion, before Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab became a giant of history, he was the second caliph and of course an early convert or an early entrant into Islam. He worked in nature. He was alone in the desert. He observed the animals that were under his watch. He took care of the responsibility that was entrusted upon him, and he learned how to manage the collective without losing the individuals that were part of his responsibility. So leadership doesn't necessarily begin in the palace. It begins with a lot of observation and a lot of deep reflection. So today what we're going to talk about is not the politics, it's about perception and how that perception shaped the mind and then ultimately the actions of one of our great leaders and one of the great leaders of humanity, really, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh. So Assad will take us through how his experiences, Umar radiallahu anh's experiences with nature, shaped the mind of one of our greatest leaders. Assad.
Okay. Yes, so when we look at the personality of this generation, and in this specific case we're going to narrow it down to just Umar radiallahu anhu. He was a very reflective person before even revelation. He spent extensive time in nature. He observed how animals self-organized. For them, a very important analogy for that society was the lone, the wolf attacks the lone sheep.
Right.
So if you stray off the away from the herd, that is very dangerous. Right. That's where the person is most vulnerable. And you can see how that analogy, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts his message, he appears to them at that time straying from the herd, from the belief system of the herd. So he's a very reflective person. And I think one of the challenges of the modern world is, you can meet someone who's 20 years old and they have never really seen the stars because they have never gone camping due to light pollution. So one of the things to help strengthen character is to have some type of attachment to nature. Right? Like I was talking to one person who was a young man from the inner city, urban areas, camping, and he said something very interesting. He said, Assad, the impact that for a 16-year-old person who's never been camping to catch a fish, to season the fish and eat the fish, it's life-changing. So the importance of attachment to nature. And we see that these people are very attached to nature, to animals, to see how animals self-organize, the analogy of straying from the herd. Another major thing is, at this stage in Umar radiallahu anhu's life, he's not really interested in politics. He's interested in thinking. He's interested even in economic empowerment. He wants to go into business. He wants to enlarge his animal herds. This is what he's looking at. And you can see his understanding of the natural world and how he can draw it to the human condition. Because he's a very reflective person, even being a young man.
He must have spent a lot of time alone.
In nature, overnight, with no pollution, and no technology.
And nobody to talk to.
And nobody to talk to.
Right. So he has to self-reflect and process the thoughts in a way that makes sense to him first.
Exactly. And what happens is, spending this much time in nature also heightens Umar radiallahu anhu's human senses.
In what way?
And observation power.
In what way?
No, because you zero in. You're watching how even animals are. If you are in nature, and again, I don't have much experience in this myself, but from what I understand, you see lead animals. You see that even animals in a herd have their distinct personalities.
And it's interesting because you're watching animals who don't have language.
Exactly.
So you're interpreting all of this without linguistic cues, without words. You're just observing the actions right, of the animals.
You can learn some basics of group dynamics from observing a herd of animals. And Umar radiallahu anhu is spends a lot of time in nature, and he sees this, and this is how he understands.
We know a lot of the prophets were shepherds, and so pretty much continuing that theme.
Exactly.
So there is something haunting about the desert. I mean, we talked about this. We heard this from you. It strips you down, no distractions. It's just you yourself. If you have to process a thought, you have to make sure that it makes sense to you. So there's a coherence that you have to solve for. You can't tell yourself the same thing and not make and not have it make sense to you.
Yeah.
So you have to process the thought, again and again. So his reflections in the wilderness weren't idle thoughts; they were the beginnings of his awakening. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I would say yes. That his reflective thinking, even at this stage in his life, shows that he's a very thinking and analytical person, and he is not susceptible to easy emotional manipulation or outbursts. Right? He has to be convinced of something. He will not accept an idea just at the spur of the moment. For him, it has to make logical sense. And some of these characteristics that he has in his personality are developed from being in nature, in isolation, and self-reflection.
So he is not reacting immediately. He is reflecting when he sees something and making sure that that process of reflection makes sense to himself, and he can actually test that with the animals because he's observing them.
Exactly. And then in a larger context, and this is a key point, one reason we are not able to operationalize the seerah is also that in some of the ways that we were perhaps maybe taught in Sunday school, the Prophet ﷺ was Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful, and then when he declares his message, everyone knows he's the truthful, and they reject him. And that shows how bad they were, how evil they were, and how erratic they were. That is only partially true. These are smart thinking people. They do have
the Jahili Arabs.
Exactly. The Arabs, the pre-Islamic Arabs, they have an organization. They believe in ideas of social sanctity. They have principles with which they live by, right? They have strong observation power.
They had a moral code.
They had a moral code. So these were just not erratic, irrational people, right? That just out of the blue said, oh, well, we're going to reject him. Yes, they rejected him initially, definitely, right? But we should not say that they were erratic, irrational people.
One of my teachers, actually, once we were having a discussion along these lines, and I asked him, why do so many people tend to want to write off that period of history as though it was something that we need to reject, right? It seems to me that they did have this moral code. They were highly sophisticated people. Of course, we know about their literature and their skill in storytelling.
Poetry,
exactly. So he actually said something, quite, which at that moment, really struck me. And he said they had hearts that were alive, because they were all, I mean, we're taking Umar radiallahu anhu as an example. Technically speaking, they were all exposed to nature in a much, much more profound way than we are.
Yes.
And so, they had that developed moral code, and they tested that moral code over centuries,
yes,
effectively.
Exactly. And then when you extend this to that, they believed in a creator.
Right.
They believed in the divine.
Right.
And they believed in these things.
And the Prophet ﷺ said, خياركم في الجاهلية خياركم في الإسلام إذا فقهوا. The best of you in Jahiliyyah will be the best of you in Islam if you understand.
Yes.
So there was something that they brought to the table.
Exactly, yeah. And that's something that really cannot be emphasized enough. We should not look at the pre-Islamic Arabs as erratic Jahili people who knew absolutely nothing. And no, they had a quote. There was a way that they conducted business. They understood in order to be successful businessmen, they had to avoid scandal.
The trust. They
Exactly.
had to build trust.
Exactly. And so that I think is one of the major reasons that we are not sometimes able to operationalize the seerah, because we write off their heritage and their moral code and the sanctity, the social sanctity that they believed in. Of course, they had some very bad practices and very evil practices.
Sure.
This is not what we're disputing.
Right.
But to just throw everything out is problematic.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly.
So maybe if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about nature as a teacher. What does nature do to teach us? Right? What is it, and how is it? Using the example of Umar radiallahu anh, how was nature teaching him?
Yeah.
And how was he receiving those lessons?
Okay, great. As we mentioned, so one, it heightens the senses. It heightens observation power. It heightens your connection even to the divine, because you see how miraculous nature is. So even in our world, we see a squirrel bury a nut, and then 3-4 months later, when it's winter or something, it can find the nut, and it doesn't have a GPS. Okay, and these are amazing lessons in nature to enhance intellectual capacity and spiritual strength. And so, big thing is, we can talk about light pollution, we can talk about noise pollution. We live in a time where there's very little time for self-reflection, and I can use the word meditation for lack of a better word.
And now it's the endless scrolling on the phone.
Exactly.
So that takes us away from nature. Even though, a lot of times you can sort of see nature on your screens.
Exactly.
But it's not the same thing.
Exactly.
Solitude, specifically, right? So we're talking about nature, and the ulama talk about wahi as being not just in the form of a book, for us, the Quran, and of course all the revealed texts from before that, but wahi also having the form of nature, because these ayat are all around us, right?
Yes.
So talk to us about solitude. What does solitude do? Why do you need to be alone in nature? What is that doing for Umar radiallahu anh?
No, solitude also, again, since we're hyper connected all the time, and there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. So we have to make sure we draw that distinction.
Okay, tell us a bit.
Well, see, for example, now, you can have 500 Facebook friends, but they're not real friends. People that you may have seldom interaction with in real life. And that's one reason there's a loneliness epidemic. But solitude is important for a person to self-reflect. Like, one of the benefits of COVID, you saw some people said when they were not going to work, they thought to themselves, is this really what I want to do for the next 5, 10, 15 years of my life?
Right.
And people made career changes because they had a time to be a little isolated, and they had a chance to self-reflect. Now, of course, we know the harms of for a lot of people, since they were in isolation, that it had an adverse effect.
That's the loneliness side of the spectrum.
That's the loneliness side of the spectrum. But it is important for a person, no matter how busy they are, to self-reflect, to thinking about thinking, what is actually even important to me? In the age of distraction, what is actually important to me?
And you have umpteen books, all the business and financial and success gurus out there, they will always tell you that you need to find your purpose. And you can't find your purpose if you compare yourself to too many people, which requires you to detach, think about things on your own terms. And then, you bring in sort of select voices that will help you process that, but those are voices that you believe and know to be close to you.
Exactly, yes. We're not advocating a lifestyle of just detaching yourself completely from society and to move to the mountains, but what we are arguing is it's important to be reflective, it's important to be deeply reflective, and that takes a lot of effort.
And that reflection, before we move on to some specific questions that I have, when we talk about moral authority, okay, how does moral authority sort of develop or generate in that milieu where, again, you are spending so much time in solitude, right? Maybe if you could sort of juxtapose the solitude that he had with the times that he may have been with people, because obviously he was with people. He had his time in nature and in the care of the herds that he had, but there was also interaction with people. So how has morality developed in that context?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question, because see, man should be in harmony with nature.
Why?
Because, it's our belief system, okay, we are representatives of the Creator in this earth, right? And the natural world is there for our use, but not for our abuse. And that was something I found very interesting, even when you study American Indian tribes. One of their concerns when they had some of these negotiations with the settlers at that time was they felt that the settlers would abuse the earth. And they found that sacrilegious. So respect for nature is very important. Deep thinking and reflection is important. And what you find with these people do this, like a modern example, let's take the example of Nelson Mandela. While he's in prison, what does he do? He thinks very deeply and even makes an effort to learn the Afrikaner's language. But, would he have been able to learn the Afrikaner's language if he didn't go to prison? I wouldn't speculate on that. But I'm making an argument that even when he was in solitude on Robben's Island, right, he used the time to think deeply, reflect deeply, master the language, learn what he could about the guards and their culture. Right. And that better equipped him eventually when he was released to lead a country.
27 years on Robben's Island.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So this is a great segue because you talked about him learning language, mm-hmm, and you were giving the example of Nelson Mandela. In the scene that we're talking about, mm-hmm, right? Umar radiallahu anh talks about the animals that he is, caring for, mm-hmm, and watching over. He almost talks as though each of those animals, despite the fact that they don't speak, he almost talks as though they have personalities.
At least from what I understand, he actually says each animal has this distinct personality, just like humans.
So what's the significance of him being able to do that?
Well, no, it proves his attachment to nature. It proves his observation power. Okay, if we see a herd of goat, right, we just see a herd of goats. Right. But he sees, okay, which of the goats is the leader in the pack, right? And it's because of his training and his attachment to nature and his deep self-reflection, again.
So that attentiveness, that ability to basically discern, mm-hmm, personality types, mm-hmm, in animals that don't speak,
yeah,
right? That really don't even bear any resemblance to us. I mean, it's not like he's watching over a group of gorillas or chimpanzees, which are closer to us than than other animals. We're talking about camels, goats, etc., right? So that ability, that attentiveness, that observation power, that being in tune, how does that translate to his ability to lead human beings?
Yeah, no, so he understands being a guardian of animals trains him to be a guardian of people later in his life. Understanding how animals organize gives him, he begins to understand organizational development, not just through the social context of the tribal order. He also begins to understand organizational development through the herding of animals. So this is a major thing, and it gives him interpretive powers.
Interpretive powers.
Yeah, like he can interpret the relationship, right? And then he doesn't see things in isolation, right? For example, when he actually says, the wolf is going to attack the lone sheep. So this is a very powerful lesson in that society, because if you are separate from the tribe, you have no tribal protection, your very physical safety is in danger. And he also understands this in a social context with the tribal social order, and he understands it within the context of animals.
Your physical safety, and it's actually your life.
Exactly.
In that case, the wolf attacks, and the sheep is gone.
Exactly. Right. And so this observation power that he develops, that's very keen and very sharp, right? He uses this later in his political career.
Any examples that you might?
Well, you see, Umar was a very reflective person. So, for example, for those of us who spent time in the corporate corridors of America, right? This is very important, right? You are even in intense negotiation. People are saying one thing, and their body language is saying something different.
Right.
Okay? And how strong is your power of perception?
Right, you need to be able to read all sorts of signs,
not just verbal,
at the negotiating table.
Exactly, right. And you can see Umar, he understands this. Sure. He understands this from a very early age.
And then he deploys that.
And he deploys that. Not exactly in the context that So we're using the boardroom. There were no boardrooms, but there were decision-making councils, for lack of a better word, right?
And he was deploying it. Maybe just one thing before we move on, but he was deploying it of course, when he was Khalifa, he
Yes.
was deploying it. But before he was Khalifa, he was also deploying it.
Exactly. Yes. This is a lifelong endeavor. This is the point that we're supposed to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. So this is an ongoing process. So.
Great. Well, I appreciate all the insights into Umar radiallahu anhu's experience. Let's talk a little bit about sort of where we are today, right? Our current systems, they don't really reward observation. They don't really encourage people to take that type of time out, right? How could we maybe encourage people to incorporate this type of training into their lives, into their experiences, for home, for work, for community work? Like, what kind of lessons can we draw from this, or rather, how can we operationalize it today? That's a better question.
Yeah, but I think one fundamental thing is no matter how busy you are, you have to have time for self-reflection, because you can't improve without self-reflection. You need self-awareness, then self-reflection, and just the era in which we are in is we're generally constantly busy. Like, I know nobody who works 40 hours.
You're always connected.
Exactly. And then you have the other connections. So this issue of self-awareness and self-reflection is vital for long-term satisfaction and success in whatever is important to you. That's a key thing. So this is why when you go to Germany, what do people do to de-stress? They go to walk in a park.
We know in Asia also, I mean, people get up in the morning. You'll see this a lot in China and other places. First thing they do is get up in the morning, they'll go to a park, they'll go out into nature, experience that, and then they'll start their day.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing, attaching yourself to nature, taking care of yourself physically, walking, these types of things are all important for us to be productive, because everything is productive. And I think a lot of people are now realizing, especially post-COVID, is this really how I want to lead 10, 20, 30 years of my life? 70, 80-hour work weeks, not having a chance to really reflect, right?
In Arabic, the word for universe or existence is kaun, right? And I had an interesting reflection some time ago, which I shared with one of our scholars. It's interesting, if you sort of maybe step away and you think about, many of us speak Urdu. And it's interesting because if you ask somebody, aap kaun hai? Or if you ask yourself, because you're talking about self-awareness, main kaun hu? It's the same word. Kaun in Arabic and main kaun hu in Urdu, you're actually basically telling yourself that you have a place in this universe. That you're actually, your existence has significance. And I think that's another thing also, is that time alone, Umar radiallahu anh he understands that he has significance for himself and for the people around him.
Yeah, and society. Yes, exactly.
A lot of people don't even give themselves that place anymore because they don't really understand that they have significance as human beings.
Yes. No, and that's why we said, like, the idea of relationships, right? Relationship between people, communities, and most importantly, ideas. And so, okay, we're in the era of specialization, super specialization, super specialization. Every field is going down this track, right? But this idea of being able to draw relationships between people, between communities and ideas is vital for the health of humanity. And I think that was one of our motivations for building the curriculum the way that we did. How do you show a relationship between ideas? These are not isolated, random events.
There's a hand behind all of it. Right? And then there's some causation. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yes. And so, how do you read behavioral patterns, right? Like even in interviewing, what do they tell us? The biggest predictor of how you're going to act in a job or perform in a job is your previous performance.
Right.
It's a field behavioral interviewing.
Right.
And so, being able to look at this and to develop those skills are vital.
So, in the sort of continuation of how we contemporize this, how we apply it today, what's the modern equivalent of tending to a herd? Well, not everybody can do that.
No, we can do what we can, right? I mean, everyone, I live in an environment where I couldn't have even a chicken in the backyard. Right. But but at least it's grasping at least fundamentally the idea. Okay, then if you can change your day-to-day life in some way, then okay, you go even on a 10-minute walk. But there's another key thing here that should not be overlooked. If you have interaction with animals, they're a living creature. You heighten your empathy.
Because you're responsible for the animal.
Exactly. And we're seeing one of the major challenges is we're seeing that people may not be as empathetic.
Well,
again, due to the digital age.
Sure.
And so this is why, just and human beings, we fundamentally believe human beings are generally fundamentally good. They don't generally want to harm people.
No,
and so again, attachment to nature, attachment to animals will help enhance empathy. So, you want your children to go visit a farm. Obviously in the era in which we live, unless you're living on a farm, you can't do it daily. But you can still make sure that they're able to do this at least once a year.
Sure.
And these type of things,
So it's really working those
consciously.
Right. Consciously working that into your schedule. Right. And making sure that there's breaks, maybe on a daily basis, ideally, but then not just doing it on your own. You have to encourage others to do it on their own if they can, but also as groups as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, because again, sure, we want all of our children to get good grades, I think enter a good university, and we understand that, right? But our drive should be to create a holistic, healthy human being.
Right.
And one of the most important ways to do this is through nature. And we see this from the first generation. Their attachment to nature, their love for their animals, their love for their camels, the way that they treated the natural space, right? The way that they shared water from a well. Like all of those things, like sharing
with
water
animals
from
and with other human beings.
With other human beings, and that also helps, foster a healthy society and a healthy human being who's empathetic.
I think we can also, as we close off, the Prophet ﷺ himself, his experience in nature shaped even the experience of the first revelation.
Yes.
Being on the
Hira,
right? Exactly, on Jabal Nur, on the Mountain of Light, as it's known. That's a time for reflection and really thinking about what's going on around him, what should change, reflecting on whatever he's doing. Is it working? Is it not working? Well, fantastic. Assad, as we close off, is there anything else that you want to maybe include or mention to the viewers?
Yeah. No, I think part of the reflective process in this is when we're studying the Seerah, we should be asking questions. See, half of knowledge is saying, I don't know. The other half of knowledge is asking good questions. So we've piloted this curriculum with imams here in Chicago, 3 of which spent 18 years at Al-Azhar. And the curriculum is 415 lessons, the entire body of knowledge, and 8,000 slides.
Wow.
And it has 2,000 probing questions.
MashaAllah.
So to just encourage people to ask questions, because if you're saying I need to understand this better, so one, and that's very vital. And then reflective questions. There's a difference between probing questions and reflective questions. Like, how does what we talked about in the Seerah apply to me? Give an example. 2, what in this makes me proud to be part of this intellectual tradition and part of the human family? Because that's important, right? Yeah. 3, what one action item do you think you would want to perhaps modify slightly, change? Okay.
Based on your context.
Based on your context.
Right.
Like, what character strengths are highlighted in this lesson? This is perseverance. This is patience. This is observation, right? And then also in the age of distraction, what is important to me? Not to Assad Koshul or to Sajjad Chowdhry or the professor, right, but to me.
Right. I think that also is a really important point. I think most people, and I'm generalizing here, or let's just say a lot of people, I think is a better way to put it, they don't even ask questions going through life.
Exactly. Like, I was in one environment, it was very interesting because it's a developing country, well, I guess it's between developing and developed. They said, look, in our culture, when someone says critical thinking is needed, it's understood as criticism.
Right. Right. And then that's seen as bad.
Exactly, and that's seen as a bad quality. And so when I'm in that environment and I'm teaching, I have to be very careful how I deploy the words critical thinking, because it's understood as criticism in a negative way. So this is why this is vital. But what we really wanted to do was, how can you operationalize the seerah? Because sensationalizing it has some benefits, but it's really operationalizing it is where we would say that where the rubber meets the road. How can the seerah give us analytical tools to not just survive, but to thrive in the environment in which we live? What lessons are there beyond saying that these were great individuals and their great achievements? What's the conceptual and ideological framework that can be deployed? For example, we mentioned during this 30 minutes organizational development. Umar radiallahu anhu begins to develop his organizational capacity, one, from the society in which he has emerged, he grows up in, the importance of client loyalty and all of this, and two, from managing herds.
A lot that he got out of managing herds. I mean, I think most people would discount it as fruitless activity, because I'm not making money. I'm not learning a new skill that I can, get rich, with overnight. And so it's a very, very different concept for a lot of people, I think.
Exactly. No, so it was great speaking with you. And again, nature is a teacher. Observation, care, empathy, moral readiness.
So there's an image that stays with me. Umar radiallahu anh in the desert, in this clip, whispering to his herd, adjusting their pace, knowing each of these animals by their individual personalities. He didn't just lead them, he actually understood them. And later, when he led people, he remembered what he learned from this experience. So the reflection for this session is, what are the quiet, undramatic spaces in your life right now that you can go to, that you can retreat to, and what might they be training you for? Because there's greatness in each one of us. That's part of what God has given us. And to discover that requires those spaces. As you heard Assad highlight, this discussion is part of a series that we are doing to highlight a much, much larger program, which you can learn about at the website at the bottom of the screen. Visit the website. You can then sign up, enroll for the curriculum and the entire course, which is over 415
lessons.
415 lessons on the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, as well as the lives of the Khulafa Rashidun.
The Khilafat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and Umar radiallahu anhu.
So it's just those two Khulafa. In any case, join us for the next session, and we'll be talking about more lessons from the Seerah and the lives of the companions.